Why don't you just leave quietly? Seriously, think about it. We are so obsessed with closing cycles in a spectacular way that we forget that sometimes the most elegant exit is the most discreet one. Why stay where you are? Stoic philosophy has a clear message. Don't waste energy on what you can't control. 023, let's be honest. How many times have you stayed in a relationship, a friendship, or even a simple job because you felt like you needed to explain yourself? Don't give in. I'll tell you very clearly. Leaving quietly is not cowardice. It is a strategy. It's making it clear without words that your peace is worth more than any useless discussion. So if you feel like you no longer fit in, what are you waiting for? Follow me because I'm going to give you 10 important reasons to understand why leaving quietly may be your best decision so far. Don't miss the last one because it will leave you speechless. But before you begin, listen to this story that will help you better understand the wisdom contained in this material. Once upon a time, in a peaceful valley, there was a gardener named Samuel, known for his dedication to cultivating unique flowers. His garden was a spectacle of colors, aromas, and life, attracting people from all over. Each plant he received their attention and care, and Samuel always found satisfaction in seeing his work reflected in the happiness of the visitors. One day, a group of people arrived at the garden, apparently interested, but they soon began to criticize everything. They said that the roses were not red enough, that the lilac scent was too strong, and that the grass was not perfectly trimmed. Samuel listened in silence as he worked. Over time, the group began to visit him more frequently, always pointing out defects and making demands. "We want an arch of flowers here, Renia. These daisies don't go with the tulips." Wow, Samuel obeyed, believing that satisfying them would bring peace, but each change seemed to lead to new complaints. One day, while he was arranging the garden according to their wishes, Samuel realized that something was missing. The bird's song had disappeared, the flowers he loved were gone, and the grass was worn out by the excess traffic. His garden, which had once reflected his passion, now seemed like a soulless work of art. It was then that he understood that no matter how hard he tried to please them, it would never be enough. That night, Samuel made a decision. At dawn, he gathered his tools and closed the garden gates. And left without saying a word. No one understood his departure, and some called him ungrateful. But Samuel did not look back in his new home away from the noise and criticism. He started a small garden this time just for himself. He planted the flowers he loved without worrying about the judgment of others. Soon the birds returned. The air was filled with fragrances, and Samuel found joy in his work again. The moral of this story is that sometimes the best decision is to walk away in silence. You do not need to justify your departure to those who do not value your effort. Just as a garden blooms better in peace, it waits when you surround yourself with people who appreciate your essence and respect you as you are. Before we start with the first lesson, if you are enjoying this content, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to stay up to date with the news. Let's start. 1. When the relationship becomes toxic. Sometimes life puts a series of traffic signs in our path, and even so we decide to ignore them. You feel trapped in a relationship that no longer has the same flame as before, but you keep asking yourself, is it just me? Or has this really become a burden? If you feel that something is no longer right, maybe it's time to face reality, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. As Sylvia Carpalo said, when we realize that the relationship is toxic, it's better to keep the good memories and in it before we start creating more negative feelings than positive ones. In other words, if you realize that things are not going well, it's better to take a step back before it becomes a bottomless pit. The first obstacle that may be holding you back is the fear of change. After all, leaving a relationship involves a series of new decisions, and everything that is outside your comfort zone seems like a minefield. Whoever wants to face the unknown is not the problem. The problem is that continuing in a relationship that no longer adds anything to you is like sitting on a broken chair just because you're too lazy to look for a new one. You may think that it's better to stay because you already know what to expect. But what you forget is that the familiar is not necessarily the best, just the most comfortable. And believe me, your comfort is not worth more than your well-being. Another big fear that arises is, what if I don't find something better? This is the classic trap of the familiar. Bad is better than the good. Deep down we know that this is nothing more than an excuse not to act. It's normal to have doubts. But think for a moment. Would you rather stay in a place that hurts you just for fear of what might come? Or are you willing to seek what you really deserve? Sometimes what we need is to stop seeing the relationship as a straitjacket and see it for what it really is. an experience that was valuable at the time, but has now come to an end. There's a whole world out there waiting for you. And the best part is that it's not based on what you already know, but on what's yet to come. Finally, we have the fear of loneliness. Maybe you imagine yourself without that person and think, what do I do with my life now? But here's some simple advice. It's not being alone that scares you, but the idea of no longer belonging to a structure, to an image that you created of yourself. People tend to cling to what they know, even to a relationship that no longer fulfills them, simply because they fear feeling excluded when they come out of that structure. However, the truth is that the most valuable relationship you have is with yourself. The Stoics knew this. Happiness does not depend on others, but on how do you see yourself and how do you deal with life's challenges. If the relationship is bad for you, leaving it is not a defeat, but a personal victory. If all this made sense to you, you probably already know that in many situations, the best thing to do is to nip the problem in the bud. No drama. Because in the end, who wants to stay stuck in a relationship that no longer works? Leaving in silence, without making a fuss, without fighting is sometimes the wisest decision. You don't need grandiose justifications or long explanations. If something is bad, it's better to let it go with a smile and a good laugh. Like DMSOS, it's not about what you lose, it's about what you allow yourself to lose. And like Epictetus, it's better to walk alone towards your future than to remain stuck in a past that no longer belongs to you. To when a relationship subtracts instead of adds. They say that one of the goals of life is to live with serenity and fulfillment. But it seems that we forget this premise every time we enter a relationship that does nothing but wear us out. How many times have you heard about the ideal partner? That idea that seems so beautiful in theory, but in practice seems like a waste of time. Unattainable, especially when you feel trapped in a relationship that feels more like a burden. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that all relationships are a disaster. But there are some that, instead of adding to you, simply drain you like a dead battery does that. Feeling of being with someone who instead of pushing you forward holds you back, questions you all the time, makes you feel insecure, and even worse, gives you the feeling that you are no longer worth anything. This is not love or partnership, much less a healthy relationship. This is simply a no to your peace of mind and a yes to unnecessary suffering. Psychologist Patricia Ramirez clearly says living with someone who doesn't add to you, who puts obstacles in your way and doesn't respect you, is living halfway. And we know this, but many times we cling to our comfort zone, believing that leaving, it would be even worse. But what if not leaving is exactly what is causing this constant suffering? Philosophy teaches something crucial. At this point, we cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. And one of the wisest responses may be to make the decision to leave silently, without scandals, without resentment. But with the head held high, true serenity lies in letting go of what no longer adds anything to us. Now the question is how to know if it's time to let go. It's simpler than it seems. Although it may hurt, if every conversation with that person leaves you empty, if every time you rate together you ask yourself why I'm still here, then it's time to reconsider your place. Relationships shouldn't be daily battlefields. No one wants to live in a constant emotional war only to get home and wear themselves out even more. The key is to recognize when the relationship has become more of a burden than a source of joy and support. And yes, I know how to take the step of leaving. It may seem scary, but what's the point of staying if in the end all that's left are disappointments and a broken heart that never completely heals? In the end, it's not about leaving with a grudge or creating unnecessary drama. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to simply leave silently, without long explanations, without having to justify your decision, just with the firmness of knowing that you deserve something better, something that really makes you grow and doesn't keep you stuck in a rut of heartbreak. If the relationship takes away more than it adds, what are you waiting to let go? Life is not about staying in a comfort zone for fear of suffering more, but rather about learning to go through difficult times to finally find peace and fulfillment. As the Stoics say, serenity lies in accepting what we cannot control and in acting with wisdom and courage to change what we can. As Marcus Aurelius said, sometimes the greatest act of self-love is to take a step back and let go of what no longer belongs to you. 3. When your feelings are no longer the same, you look in the mirror, and no matter how much you try to deny it, deep down, you know that your feelings have changed. That person with whom you shared so many moments of laughter and dreams no longer awakens in you what it did before. It's like rereading a book you loved as a child and realizing that it no longer tells you anything. What shall we do when we realize that love is no longer the same? Should we continue forcing something that no longer seems natural, or simply leave without saying anything? Let's get straight to the point. Sometimes the best option is to leave in silence. No drama, no long and empty explanations. It's like those chocolates that you don't like but insist on eating just because they're there. Letting go is much healthier. We all know that emotions change and that's not a problem, unless you insist on ignoring this reality. The real problem arises when you stay stuck in a relationship that no longer completes you, just out of fear of what others will say or to avoid hurting the other person. But the truth is that it's not fair to keep something out of obligation. It's like having a car that no longer starts, but continuing to put gas in it, hoping it will magically work. It won't happen. The effort is unnecessary and frustration is inevitable. And then comes the big question: how to say this? The answer is simple: with honesty. No excuses or beating around the bush. Tell the other person that your feelings have changed, that it's not like before. There's no need to create drama or stage a soap opera. Sometimes silence says more than 1,000 words, and respect for the feelings of both is the most important thing. In Stoic philosophy, we learn that we must accept what we cannot control and act with reason, not with passing emotions. So if you no longer feel the same way, the best thing to do is take a step back and allow both of you to follow your paths. Now, why is it so difficult to do this? Because we are experts at postponing the inevitable. We are afraid to face it. Reality, even knowing that it is the fairest thing to do. We stay in relationships that no longer serve us, hoping that something will change or simply to avoid confrontation. However, there is something liberating about being honest and making a decision. It is like cleaning a house that has not been cleaned for months. At first, it seems like a huge task, but once everything is in its place, the relief is immense. Honesty allows us to move forward without the weight of guilt or regret. It also avoids dragging another person into something that has no future. If the other person is still in love with you, the cruelest thing would be to continue knowing that there is no longer a path together. The best thing for both of us is to be clear and let each other follow their own journey. It is not cruelty. It is generosity. Sometimes, true love for yourself and for the other person is not in continuing for convenience or to maintain the appearance of happiness, but in knowing when it is time to say goodbye. Giving space for both of you to find what you really want is an act of courage. Stoic philosophy teaches that controlling our emotions and wisdom in actions are what really make a difference in our lives. Therefore, if you no longer feel the same way, perhaps it is time to let go without grudges, without false hopes, and remember to leave in silence. It is not to run away, it is to respect the time and feelings of both. As they say, true love is measured by the freedom we give, not by the control we exercise. For when intimacy ceases to exist, what happens when suddenly you realize that the flame that once shone between you and your partner has gone out? Have you ever wondered why now your relationship seems more like a cohabitation between roommates than a romance full of complication and desire? The answer, however uncomfortable it may be, is quite clear: intimacy has disappeared. And if this happens, it is because something important is failing. Silence is the first warning sign, but not that comfortable silence, but the one that invades the spaces of the relationship and makes you question if there is still something to be shared, or if you are just in the same physical space. The concept of intimacy goes far beyond the moments alone that we have with our partner. It goes beyond physical contact and extends to complicity, to exchange looks, to small gestures of affection that do not always require words, but that really make you feel connected to another person. When all this disappears, what is left? The relationship no longer has life. All that remains is a shared space where routines, comfortable silences, and emotional distances survive in place of love. The reasons for the loss of intimacy are many, but one of the main ones is that we stop seeing each other with the same eyes as we did at the beginning. Over time, when the relationship stabilizes, expectations fall, and that desire that used to make you look at your partner with a sparkle in your eyes begins to disappear. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that love is built only on a foundation of comfort. But the truth is that comfort is not love, it is just habit. And when only habit remains, true connection is missing, the one that keeps the passion alive. There's nothing wrong with recognizing that the relationship needs a change. Sometimes this change doesn't mean waiting for something magical to happen, but rather accepting that if things aren't going well, the best thing is to let go. Leave in silence, without drama and without shouting. It's one of the wisest decisions you can make, because when intimacy ceases to exist, the relationship becomes a fight for something that is no longer there and something that cannot be forced back instead of continuing to try to rekindle a flame that has already gone out. It is better to learn to let go. The Stoics teach us that true freedom comes when we are able to let go of what no longer serves us. Let go of what does not add value to our lives. So what should you do if you feel trapped in a relationship? First, do some sincere reflection. Are you in this relationship because you really care or just out of habit? If the answer is the second option, it is time to consider saying goodbye. You may feel afraid at first, but this feeling is just a reminder that there is still something inside you that knows what is best. In the end, leaving in silence is a form of respect for yourself. How many other relationships come to an end with dignity, without carrying more weight than necessary? After all, life is too short to be wasted on relationships that no longer nourish us. As Kung said, it is better to leave in silence and with respect than to continue fighting for something that no longer has a solution. 5. Lack of communication. Communication is like the oxygen of a relationship. Without it, everything suffocates. Sometimes we do not realize it, but the fact of not speaking, not listening, or simply not knowing how to communicate can turn the relationship into a battlefield where both lose, even if they do not recognize it. Communication fails, so why don't we all speak the same emotional language? Even though we share the same language, if you feel ignored, unheard, or stuck in an endless cycle of arguments, something isn't working. But calm down, not all is lost, or maybe it is. Have you tried talking to someone who doesn't listen to you? It's like shouting at a wall. A lot of effort, little response. When one of the parties feels that they are not taken into consideration or that they are stuck in endless arguments, the frustration only grows, and the worst is when silence becomes the easiest option. As if words were sharp knives ready to hurt. Don't deny it, we've all been there. What starts as a simple "it was nothing" can end up in a volcano of accumulated emotions erupting at the most inopportune moment. With the lack of communication, communication is like the oxygen of a relationship. Without it, everything suffocates. Sometimes we don't realize, but the fact of not speaking, not listening, or simply not knowing how to communicate can turn the relationship into a battlefield where both lose, even if they do recognize it, because communication fails. So why don't we all speak the same emotional language? Even though we share the same language, if you feel ignored, unheard, or stuck in an endless cycle of arguments, something is not working. But calm down, not all is lost, or maybe it is. Have you tried talking to someone who does not listen to you? It is like shouting at a wall. A lot of effort, little response. One of the parties feels that they are not being taken into consideration, or that they are stuck in endless arguments. The frustration only grows, and the worst is when silence becomes the easiest option, as if words were sharp knives ready to hurt. Don't deny it. We have all been there. What starts as a simple nothing can end up in a volcano of accumulated emotions erupting at the most inopportune moment. Then the question arises, what to do when words do not work? Many believe that walking away, silence is the best option. You leave, keep quiet, let the other person keep their thoughts, and move on with your life. But does this really solve anything? Maybe in some situations, like in a football game where the referee needs to decide whether to give the card or not. Silence can work as a preventive technique. Avoiding talking when everything is on the verge of collapse can prevent further damage. However, this is not a definitive solution. The ideal is to communicate assertively, and if it is not possible, to leave the scene with a clear conscience, knowing who did not fall into a trap of empty words. The wise Stoics of the past were not fans of empty speeches. For them, action and internal reflection were more valuable than any superficial conversation. If you feel that you cannot communicate, first reflect on yourself. It is really so important to fight for. Everywhere the Stoics teach us that in moments of conflict, what matters is not what the other person says, but how you respond. If you draw in a need to be understood, you will end up lost in a meaningless battle. Sometimes silence is wisdom, and other times it is just the need to take a breath and think before speaking. Sometimes walking away in silence is the best decision, but not as an escape, but as a necessary pause to avoid a greater disaster. The key is to know when to speak, when to be silent, and above all, when to speak in the right way, because many times it is not about what you say, but how you say it. If your relationship is not based on honest and open communication, it will be like building a house on quicksand. Sooner or later, everything will fall apart. So the next time you feel that silence is your only way out, think if it really is the solution or just the beginning of something deeper that needs to be faced. As Nye said, Words are not always the solution. Sometimes silence is the greatest act of wisdom. 6. The lack of commitment is like being in a race for two, but one of the two decides to rest at the starting line while the other continues confidently believing that in the end, both will reach the same destination. And of course, when the one who was left behind decides to ask, where are you going? The one who has already advanced a few meters simply does not know if he should wait or continue. Alone, this, dear reader, is not a relationship. It is just a service station for poorly managed emotions. When one of the two is willing to take a step forward in the relationship, whether it be living together, getting married, having children, or planning a shared future, and the other remains still like a stone in the middle of the river, the flow of the relationship begins to get out of control. And if this stagnation lasts long, there comes a time when the water no longer flows in the same way. The flame goes out, the enthusiasm becomes an emotional burden, and what is worse, the lack of commitment creates a chasm so great that not even the best of bridges could cross it. Yes, you read, silence can be much more than the absence of words, especially when you face the lack of commitment of someone who says they want to be with you but doesn't move forward. You deserve someone willing to walk by your side, not someone who just watches you move forward while waiting for everything to resolve itself. Empty words like "it's not the right time" or "I'm busy with other things" are just excuses to avoid taking the next step. And you know that in these moments, doing what many avoid, leaving in silence, can be the best decision. It doesn't mean running away, but choosing to respect yourself. If the other person is ready to move forward, don't try to do it for both of you. Stoic philosophy, with its practical view of life, teaches us to focus on what is within our control and to let go of what isn't. And as much as it hurts, a relationship that doesn't move forward doesn't grow and keeps you stuck in a waiting cycle. It's out of your control. You can wait forever for the other person to make up their mind, or you can take a step towards your own freedom, towards what you truly deserve. You are not a way station for anyone. You are the final destination. And if someone doesn't have the courage to walk by your side, it's better to continue alone. That carrying the weight of an unshared commitment is simple. Do what your intuition has been telling you from the beginning. Choose silence. When words no longer make sense, choose to go it alone, if necessary, because in the end no one wants to be in a relationship where one runs and the other stands still waiting to be caught up. This is not love, it is codependency, and in a relationship like that no one wins. The other's lack of commitment is a sign. Of course, you don't need to wait for someone to decide if you are not ready to take the next step. Don't let yourself get stuck waiting. As the Stoics say, the only control you have is over your decisions and your future, not over the steps that others choose to take. If the commitment is not present, it is time to go it alone if necessary. As they say, silence is the refuge where you find what you really need. 7. We deserve to be happy. Have you ever stopped to think about what it really means to be happy? No, I am not talking about that momentary happiness you feel when buying something new or watching your favorite series. I'm talking about a deep happiness that comes when you are at peace with yourself, without depending on anyone or anything external. And here is the big question: do you feel worthy of this happiness? If your answer is yes, congratulations, you are already one step ahead. If it is no, let me give you a little reflection. Living with someone who is not good for you, who makes you feel uncomfortable, or who drags you into a routine you do not want is an act of betrayal against yourself. It is a subtle way of telling yourself, I do not deserve to be happy. Did you know that staying in a relationship just out of fear of loneliness or out of pure force of habit is a form of self-deception? Putting up with the unbearable, what does not add to you, and what drains you, is not courage. True courage lies in making the decision to go it alone, even if it seems scary, even if fear whispers to you that being alone is worse. This does not mean that you should run away from everything that bothers you, but when you feel deep down that something is not right, the greatest act of respect for yourself is to take a step towards freedom. The Stoics already said, we cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond, and in this case the control is in your hands. You do not need to be trapped in a relationship that does not complete you, and you do not need to live just to avoiding loneliness. Freedom, however uncomfortable it may seem at first, will allow you to find a happier, more complete and free version of yourself. The first step is to recognize that you deserve to be happy exactly as you are, with your lights and shadows. You don't need anyone's approval to feel good about yourself. Whether a relationship is loving, friendly, or even professional, it makes you feel inferior for continuing in it without unnecessary drama or explanations. It is not cowardice. It's the smartest and most mature act you can do. It's like being stuck in a board game that no longer entertains you. You get up, put the pieces away, and go look for something that really excites you. Why keep playing? If the game is no longer fun, do it for yourself. Because you deserve to be surrounded by people who add to you, who respect you, and who help you grow. Loneliness is not the enemy, but rather an opportunity to discover yourself, renew yourself, and do what truly makes you happy. Happiness is not outside of you. It is not in a person, in a relationship, or in a job. True happiness arises when you realize that you don't need anything or anyone to make you feel less than if a relationship or situation doesn't bring you peace. Why stay in it? Leaving your comfort zone can be scary, but it is the first step to welcoming a more authentic and meaningful life. As Nelson Mandela said, freedom is not the absence of responsibilities. It is the ability to choose what truly makes us happy. 8. When mutual respect is lost, have you ever stopped to think about what happens when respect disappears as if it had never existed? It is like a house of cards that collapses with a simple breath. In relationships, respect is the foundation that supports everything else: trust, affection, communication. But when this foundation collapses, what is left is an emotional scene worthy of a horror movie. And the worst is that sometimes the best decisions are the quietest ones. We live in a time when respect seems to be on vacation, or worse, when some consider it unnecessary. Lack of consideration, verbal aggression, and disrespectful attitudes have become part of the routine in many relationships. But those who suffer from this do not always have the courage to face the situation, and that is where the most interesting question comes in. Instead of shouting, arguing, or trying to change someone who is not willing to respect you, leaving in silence may be the best strategy. It seems drastic, maybe, but silence, it is often more eloquent than any words. Imagine for a moment that you are trapped in a relationship where everything you do becomes a reason for contempt or mockery. Every attempt at communication is like throwing a message in a bottle into the sea. What do? Keep fighting for something that no longer has a basis. This is where Stoic philosophy comes in. The Stoics, those wise men who teach us to deal with what we cannot change and to focus on what depends on us, would give us some advice. Of course, don't waste your energy trying to change what is beyond your control. Respect, like everything that is truly worthwhile, needs to be mutual. If there is no respect, the best thing you can do is take a step back without making a fuss, without waiting for explanations. Just walk away. You may be wondering, how do I do that without exploding? The answer is simple: with practice. Silence is not passivity, but a conscious strategy. Just like a chess player who decides not to move a piece, not because he cannot, but because he knows that it is not yet the right time. Silence is your masterstroke. You do not need to shout to be heard. Sometimes, simply walking away is a much stronger message than any argument. And although it may hurt at first, silence gives you something that fights can never give you: peace. Enough of repeating words, looking for reasons or excuses. In the end, you realize that it's no longer about me or you, but about what you deserve, and you deserve respect. Don't be afraid to apply what the great Stoic thinkers taught us. The key to our happiness is learning to let go what doesn't bring us peace. If respect is gone, this relationship is nothing more than an emotional battlefield that leads nowhere. Life is too short to be wasted on endless fights. If what you need is a breath, then let go. RC is about winning or losing. But when it's time to take it back, remember this, my friend. And if you still don't understand, remember that respect is not begged for if it's deserved. And if they don't give it to you, the best thing you can do is shut up and leave. When there's no more support, sometimes love turns into a distant echo, a whisper that you wish for. People often talk about breakups as if it were necessary to shout, fight, or at least make a big show. But in truth, many times the wisest and most honest person is the one who can help you. Liberating is to walk away in silence, especially when the emotional support that once existed begins to disappear like smoke carried by the wind. Imagine for a moment that you are a boat in the middle of a storm. At first, your partner at the helm helps you to sail and calm the waves, but little by little you realize that this person is no longer looking at the horizon. They are distracted, looking at the world itself, ignoring the wind that pushes you towards the rocks. The boat begins to sail alone. While you struggle not to sink, the storm continues to roar. But there is no one else to help you face it. You remain there waiting for something to change, suffering for something that is clearly about to sink. In this case, maybe the best option is to stop fighting and start swimming towards the Sure, emotional support in a relationship is like the glue that holds the pieces of a puzzle together. Without it, the image no longer makes sense. At first, both support each other, stand up together, and face the challenges of life side by side. But what happens when one of the two starts to disqualify the concerns of the other, minimize feelings, or even worse, diminish the importance of their problems? That, my friend, is the first sign that the emotional connection no longer exists is when someone stops being your refuge and ends up becoming your storm. Why stay in the storm when you can go out and find the sun? The Stoics always taught that we should accept what we cannot change, and that there is wisdom in letting go of what no longer adds value to us. There is no point in holding on to something that no longer sustains you. Life goes on with or without the support you were hoping for. The best thing you can do is seek your peace on your own instead of waiting for someone who no longer sees your suffering to come and save you. The lack of emotional support can be as harmful as an invisible wound. It affects your self-esteem, your mental health, and even the way you see yourself. When you realize that you can no longer count on your partner, silence becomes your only way out. Sometimes the best way is not to confront the other person, but to withdraw with dignity. Not for lack of courage to fight, but because there is no more to fight for. Don't fool yourself. Don't wait for a change that will probably never come. In many cases, silence is the greatest cry for freedom. You don't need scandals or the last argument. Just walk away in silence, without resentment, but with certainty. Absolute that your inner peace is worth more than any love that doesn't support you, so the next time you realize that the emotional support is no longer there, that you feel more alone than ever within a relationship, consider that leaving in silence can be the act of courage. You need not all goodbyes need words. Sometimes the best way to say goodbye is to say nothing. And remember this great reflection: those who wait for circumstances to change lose the opportunity to change themselves. 10. Monotony reigns. Have you ever caught yourself looking at the person you share your life with and wondering how they got here? No, I'm not talking about that feeling of wow, we are made for each other, but rather that tired sigh that arises every time you feel stuck in the routine. It's that feeling where the days blend together, the conversations become a repetitive echo, and everything seems predictable and familiar. The relationship has fallen into that endless abyss of monotony. Each day resembles the last. Each night is the same as the one before. There are no more surprises, emotion, or that flame that once lit the connection between you. The same conversations, the same gestures, the same habits. Instead of growing together, you are just fulfilling a role with no room for new experiences, adventures, or growth. This, my friend, is the perfect scenario for interest to slowly dissolve into thin air. Curious how we cling to what no longer excites us. Isn't it sometimes we stay in what we know for fear of the emptiness that may arise on the other side? It is the fear of change of, and now what do I do? That keeps us stuck, but deep down we know that things don't have to be this way forever. And if you are in this relationship just for fear of the unknown, and if instead of being better, you are just comfortable in your comfort zone, even if that means dissatisfaction, Stoic philosophy has something to say about this. True freedom isn't letting go of what no longer adds value to your life. The Stoics teach you is that clinging to what no longer serves is a form of emotional slavery. And although not everything in life needs a radical change, sometimes it is necessary to make difficult decisions. If the relationship has become just a matter of fulfilling a role, wouldn't it be wiser to take a step back than to remain stuck in the routine? Leaving quietly doesn't mean running away from problems, but rather taking control of your life means understanding that sometimes the best thing to do is to give space for both of you to grow on your own, rather than clinging to what is no longer what it used to be. It is not about giving up, but about learning to let go of what no longer adds anything to you. Letting silence speak for you is one of the wisest decisions you can make. But how do you do this without the world falling apart around you? First, take an honest assessment. Does this relationship still bring you something positive? Do you feel fulfilled, or are you just stuck in a routine? Do you feel like there is no longer any growth? Are you just existing together? Maybe it is time to rethink what you really need to move forward, and if you decide that the best thing to do is to leave, do so with the peace of knowing that you are giving yourself the opportunity to grow on your own rather than remaining stagnant. Conclusion: when everything becomes monotonous, it is easy to believe that things will always be this way. But remember that we are not destined to live in an infinite repetition. Life is not a looping movie, no matter how much it may seem at times. And if at some point you come to the conclusion that the best thing to do is to leave in silence, don't feel guilty. Sometimes taking this step is the first act of self-love. So if you realize that the flame has gone out and only routine is left, don't be afraid to follow another path. As much as it hurts, my friend, silence can be the answer we need when there are no words left to understand each other. I sincerely hope that this message has been useful. I want to sincerely congratulate you for having come this far and having completed the video. This means that you want to improve as a person. If you liked the video, leave your comment. If you do know what to comment, comment with gratitude. This way I will know that you watched until the end. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, what are you waiting for? Subscribe now and join us. Stoicism is full of teachings like this that are applicable to our daily lives. Therefore, I encourage you to continue learning about this philosophy. Here are 2 videos full of Stoic wisdom so that you can continue learning until the next.